You're listening to episode 176 of the Tennis Files podcast on how to get faster on the court with Lee Taft. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Tennis Files podcast. This is Mirban and I'm back with another in-depth interview for you. And this one is about getting faster on the court, developing speed and also power. And really happy and pleased to have Lee Taft on the podcast, also known as the Speed Guy. He is highly respected as one of the top athletic movement specialists in the world. He's devoted over 30 years to training multi-directional speed to all types of athletes. And Lee teaches his multi-directional speed methods to top performance coaches, fitness professionals, the MLB, NBA, NFL. He actually started his speed coaching career at the Bollettieri Tennis Academy, which is really cool to hear that he started in the tennis world. And yeah, I mean, it just was a great episode because we talk about very actionable items, you know, things like an actual speed workout routine that is simple and that you can do to develop your speed on the court, and also the best exercises that you can do to develop your strength, which can then transfer into power and speed in the gym. And just a lot of really key principles about developing speed, as well as mistakes that athletes make when they're training. So this one's a great one. I do suggest that you either have pen and paper or notepad or whatever it is that you use to type out, or, you know, you can just rewind as well. But a lot of great stuff here. Lee will go into describing a bunch of the drills and exercises. So that's why I kind of suggest that you write things down. That's what works for me usually, to remember these things. But in any case, I think you'll really enjoy this one. So enjoy learning how to get faster on the court by listening to my interview with Lee Taft. And here it is. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Tennis Files podcast. It's really a pleasure and an honor to have Lee Taft on the podcast, and he is affectionately known as the Speed Guy. And I have to give a shout out to my friend Aaron Patterson for opening my eyes to all the great work that Lee does. Very impressive. He's trained so many different facets of sports and so many high-level players and coaches that it's really great to have Lee on to just really help us learn how to get faster on the court and just become better athletes. So Lee, thanks for coming on, and really appreciate it.
Oh, I can't thank you enough. This is exciting. I've been looking forward to it. Yeah, Aaron's a great guy. I'm glad he connected us. And, you know, I think opportunities like this, I never take light, because I get the chance to learn and to share information and hopefully make something make sense for somebody out there.
Yeah, well, thanks, Lee. I can tell right away that you're really humble, and but you, like I said, you do such amazing work. So it's going to be really great to talk to you about this. And a lot of people, obviously, they want to get faster on the court, but they have no idea, you know, what to do. And so that's why we kind of brought you in here. So it's always fascinating for me to learn about how people first got into their profession. So I wanted to ask you, you know, how you got into the world of speed and also strength and whatnot.
Yeah, so I am the youngest of 6 in my family, and wow. my dad, he's passed on many years ago, but my dad, my 2 brothers were teachers, coaches, ADs, administrators, everybody. My 2 of my sisters were teachers, so I grew up in education. I grew up in coaching. I grew up in physical education. So that was. And fitness, because they were all into fitness, especially my father. And so, you know, I kind of grew up around it, you know, and then I started in 1989 as a teacher, but I was also doing some fitness just on the side back then. And then in 91, I ended up at Bollettieri Tennis Academy, which everybody knows now as IMG. So that was really my first big job in strength and conditioning. And I went to another academy after that called Palmer Tennis Academy. And then I did a little bit with University of Kentucky men's team. I worked a little bit with them up there. And then I've worked a lot with, you know, athletes of all sports, but I've always been involved with tennis. And but that's kind of how I got started. You know, it was really I was a teacher, I was a coach, and it didn't matter if I was coaching basketball, football, track, tennis, whatever, or coaching strength and conditioning. It's still communicating, right? It's still teaching. So, but that's really how it started. Yeah, it's amazing. It's been over 30 years now, and I feel like I'm just getting started. So it's been a good ride.
Love it. That's really the best feeling you can have. Yeah, and I feel like it reminds me of the book Range, because a lot of people who really do great things, they often have a lot of experiences across different facets of life. And so you were, teaching in many different areas, and I think that that really helped you just become the expert that you are today. But I want to ask you about how you actually got into that job at the Bollettieri Academy.
So that was when I did my master's at the United States Sports Academy in Alabama, that was my mentorship. So I went there. I actually got offered a job really quick when I was there. I ended up not taking it because they were going to pay me like $13,000 for the year. And I'm like, I got to eat, I got to be able to survive. So I chose to go elsewhere to another academy, but that's how I actually got there, was because of a mentorship opportunity. And what was really neat was, because I had already been a teacher and I'd been a coach, they recognized that quickly. So they put me in charge of a lot of the large group training, doing things out on the fields and the track when these new groups would come in. And, because I had the phys ed background, I knew how to organize large group. So it just gave me great experience, great confidence. And it was, and it was a tough environment to work. Nick Bollettieri, who was, still in his prime then, was a tough character to work for, but it was a unique environment.
Yeah, one of the greats, and I've had him on the podcast too, and he's one of a kind for sure.
It sure is.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, when you got to the Bollettieri Academy, and as you went through it, what types of things did you learn specifically about tennis, and speed that you thought was maybe very valuable and that you have carried with you and taught to others?
Yeah, so I also was a tennis player. I played some college tennis, and I played a lot of tournament tennis after that. Nothing huge, but I was experienced in the sport. So I kind of understood the movements. But when I got to that elite level, and like Pete Sampras was big at the time, he was there, and Courier, guys like that. And when you watch them play and move, you realize how vital accurate movement is. Okay, we talk about efficiency and things like that, but it has to be very accurate, because their time from response to ground stroke is so minimal that they can't make a lot of mistakes. So I learned a lot about making sure that they attacked space really well. They escaped the space that they're in, and they attacked new space really, really well. And I was like a sponge. I was the type, when I had a break or during, lunch or whatever, I would go watch. I would go around the courts. Mary Pierce was another one I used to watch a lot. And I would watch him hit, I'd watch him move, and I just took mental notes. I was young at the time. I think I was 25. And I would just watch him move. And I realized didn't matter if it was the number one player in the world or a junior high player learning to play the game. Movement, it was still the same, just the quality of movement was different. So what I started to understand was the central nervous system was dropping these clues. It was telling me something, and I was smart enough back then to not try to act like I knew everything. I just absorbed a lot of things, and I said, gosh, every time they had to react, their feet did these certain things. But I noticed it with young kids, high school level players, college and pros did it. So I knew there was something there. And that's when I started to create a lot of the concepts that I teach still today.
Super interesting. And I mean, this very broad question, but what comprises speed? A lot of people want speed, but maybe they don't understand like what makes speed. So can you kind of talk to us about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if we go technically we want to be efficient with our limbs. Okay, so we can just say, we have to be able to have our limbs collapse when we need them to be quick through from the back of the body to the front. We need to have them long when they need to produce force. Okay, so aside from that, what people misunderstand is speed in a sport, especially like tennis, has as much to do with perception, reading, seeing it early, and then being able to move. Because I am sure you've seen players who you would say, gosh, that, female player or male player gets to everything, but yet they're not the fastest players in the world, but they just get there. That's the player that has great, what we would call the prediction model. They have that ability to see things almost before it's happening, but they notice certain angles, certain tilts, certain racket head positions as it's happening, and that tips them off as to where they have to go. So speed isn't just Usain Bolt blowing people away in 100. Speed is the ability to be able to see, react, and then perform really, really early so that you're in position to make a play, and then the perception of speed is there.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm sure a lot of players who are a little bit older love that as well, because that gives you a lot of hope that if you can just be very proficient at recognizing and picking up upon clues, then you can even if you're not the fastest, you can still get to the balls and anticipate and all that. So that's really good. I mean, what is that? Just repetition, or like how do you get athletes to actually improve upon that? I guess you could call it an anticipation area.
Yeah, definitely. So again, if we were to look at a beginner, they have a difficult time reading bounce, reading spin, reading angles, reading where the ball is going to be. They're late. They're just basically late on everything, right? The more experience I have, I get rid of this conscious energy of having to think through everything, and I just start to subconsciously react, and I can start to see angles better. I can see things, and that only comes through repetition. There are some people that are just genetically gifted, right, and they just pick things up early and often, and maybe their mom or their dad were great at it, and they just exposed to it. But most times, the more exposure they get to having to react to their environment to perform a task, the better they get. But here's the problem, and you know this. Most coaches and most athletes don't have the patience to train through the ugliness. Ugliness is when synaptogenesis, that's when the brain says, you know what? I'm seeing a pattern there. I think I'm going to start to build you a pathway. And if you keep showing that pathway gets cleaner and cleaner. So I think that's one of the biggest issues is we want things to look pretty all the time. That's why we do ball machine drills, and we tell them we're going to hit 10 forehands, and then we're going to hit 10 backhands. And what happens is then we go play somebody that slices the ball at an angle and hits it deep in the corner, and we don't know what to do. So experience and great players, great movement, great speed comes from repetitions and problem solving. The better you get at problem solving, and you only get that by exposure, the better you can play.
Awesome. And it's very eye-opening. I feel like half the battle is getting people to actually realize that they can have a strategic mindset of picking up on these clues and still getting faster. Lee, from a more of a technical and movement standpoint, what's the first step? Let's say we have a 4-5 tennis player, pretty decent, plays USA leagues, and they realize that, I have, or I want to become faster on the court. Where do you start with these types of players to get them on that path?
Yeah. It's a really, really good question. So I'm going to kind of take a holistic approach first. I am very big on foundation, okay? Just like the sport, okay? I have to learn grip. I have to learn, unit turns. I have to learn all that stuff. Same with movement. So I have 7 patterns that I like every athlete to do. Tennis, basketball, baseball, whatever. And if they can establish these 7 patterns, and they're basically acceleration, linear acceleration, sprinting, jumping, backpedaling, hip turn, shuffle, and lateral run. A lateral run is known to most people as a crossover, but I call it a lateral run. So if I can get an athlete to be able to perform those well, now I can get them to accelerate through those better and use those better. So if I'm a tennis player at the level you just said, a 4-5, and I want them to be able to accelerate better, maybe out to a forehand or on an angle. Number one, they have to be able to produce enough force. If they can produce enough force and they can produce that force quick enough, they will start to create separation of arms and legs, okay? Rather than taking these short little choppy steps, when I grew up, it was always you take a lot of little steps, you get there and then you hit. Now the third step, we're actually into the stroke, right? If it's a wide forehand or backhand, we get there and we stroke almost through the step. And that's, you have to, the ball is coming so fast, right? So the ability to be able to accelerate quickly is force into the ground, the ability to use the arms properly, and the ability to separate the 2 legs. So I don't want my 2 legs to, stay close together. Like my 2 thighs have to be able to get away from each other. That allows me to create force with one and prepare to create force with the other. Then they just switch. Doing drills like that, resisted type drills. So if I took, let's say you were my athlete, I put a band around you and I had you accelerate maybe 3 to 5 steps, or maybe we could go 10 meters or something like that. Now I can start to have you work on those force production angles that we need to get you to accelerate better. So there's a ton of drills we can use, but it's about making sure posture position is good so then we know function can be better. Gotcha.
I mean, is it possible for a player to be able to improve their speed, if they don't have a coach, or is that something that you think is really, really important? Like, can they just watch, videos or something like that and still improve, or is it not the best way?
It's probably not the best way. If they have somebody that can help them is good, but I grew up without people like us. I didn't have a performance coach. I didn't have a strength coach, and I got faster and faster because I ran. Mm-hmm. You got to run, right? You got to sprint. You got to get fast. So even though, when I work with tennis players, we still sprint. We don't just accelerate. I know tennis players are not going to get up to max velocity speed, but if we can get a tennis player to understand, listen, go outside, start maybe your first 2 to 3 sessions going 10 to 12 meters, and then start to build up 15 to 20 over the next couple of weeks, and then eventually get 30 and 40. That ability, even though I know I'm never going to run straight 40 meters on a tennis match, that ability improves my foot strength, my ankle strength, my lower leg strength. Now that strength that I just built can also be used when I have to change direction, when I have to accelerate 3 steps to go get a ball, or 7 steps to get an angled drop shot, or a chase down a lob or something like that. So yes, they can do it. They have to get out and run. But even if they had, we could say a coach, or we could say a consultant, someone that just says, hey, when you're out there, just think about doing this with your arms, thinking about this with your posture. Don't overstride, get off your heels, something like that, and then go to work. So if they don't have a full-time coach, at least get some advice. That's the beauty of social media now. You can go on YouTube and find pretty much anything you want to learn. You just got to be careful what you're finding, but you can, for the most part, find something that will help them accelerate.
Yeah, beautiful. I love to hear that, because it's always kind of a question of I'm doing these drills, but is my technique okay? So it sounds like maybe you don't, even if you don't have the best technique or whatever, you can still get faster by training by yourself and just making sure you're not doing any crazy over the top type of incorrect movements, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And technique is important. Mm-hmm. We know that, but one of my biggest pet peeves is when coaches don't let athletes run until they get what they call perfect technique. Well, you're denying an athlete the chance to get faster, because sometimes the act of running fast starts to clean up technique. And as they get faster, they're probably getting stronger because the stress they're placing on bone, on tissue, on ligaments, on joints, and that stress gets adapted to. And now all of a sudden, next thing you know, they start running better and their technique cleans up just because of need for the limbs to move the way they have to. Back when I first started coaching in 1989, I was in track, football, and basketball. So we did a lot of running, a lot of sprinting. We sprinted them. All right, we helped with technique and stuff, but they just got better because they got stronger at it. And next thing you know, they became better runners.
Love it. And so we're talking about putting in the reps and running and sprinting. Can you get strong like that and not strength train? In other words, is it really important to strength train as well to complement your on court or on track work as well?
I think it is. I think if you can get good quality strength training, I think that's important. But there's always going to be, two sides of the story. What does strength training mean, right? What are we talking about? So I think running is a great way to get an athlete that has never done a lot of running, a lot of sprinting, we're talking, and a lot of change of direction. They're going to get stronger because of those stresses. Okay, so they're going to gain it. But then if you look at somebody like, Nadal, Roger Federer, Serena, players like that, just running isn't going to make them stronger. It may maintain some things. So they need to do strength training. For them, it's not only to help performance, but it's to help reduce the potential for injury, right? But a tennis player needs to be able to have strength training that is synchronizing movement. My biggest fear is that we think, if we can get them to a 300, 350 deadlift, we know we can make them faster. I'm like, well, maybe we can do that. But if we got them to do a single leg squat with great control and gradually adding speed, now we've got them doing something that they're probably going to do a lot. They're going to lunge into a volley. They're going to reach for a wide ground stroke in a stretched out position where that one leg is going to take, 90% of the body weight. So I think strength training has a different meaning than it does if I'm training an offensive lineman in the NFL, right? They need strength because that's self-preservation, right? As where a tennis player needs the strength to be able to stay on the court, to compete really well, and to stay healthy.
Perfect. So it sounds like, doing exercises which kind of incorporate or mimic some sort of movement on the court is generally a good way to go, I guess. So how much do you mix that in? And I guess maybe, again, the focus will be on the amateur 4 to 4-5 player or thereabouts. How much do you mix the specific movements in with, like, a squat or a deadlift or, does it just depend, I guess, on the person?
Yeah, it does. It depends. I think those are functional patterns everybody should be able to do well, right? Just like I have my movement locomotive patterns. I think in the weight room, everybody should be able to squat, everybody should be able to hinge, push, pull, all those things. I would say for tennis, obviously racquetball and squash and badminton, sports like that, I do a lot of unilateral training. Mm-hmm. And I'm not opposed to I'm not one of these people like, oh gosh, if you put a bar on your back, you're going to get hurt. That's not me. I'm a fan of squatting and cleaning and all that stuff. But I understand that if I can get them faster, if I can get them quicker and moving better, and then use the strength to aid in that, because I don't need them. It's been proven people can be unbelievably successful at the highest level and not do a lot of strength training. Okay, that can be done. We've seen that. I don't know that you could do that in football. I don't know that you could be successful and handle that just because of the nature of it, right? And we're starting to see it in maybe even basketball. You better, you got to be strong to handle the physicality of it. Tennis, through great repetition and great timing and sequencing, they can still stroke the ball well. They can develop timing. They can develop, a great slice and touch and all that, even if they didn't lift weights. But we know if we lift weights, we can probably protect them better. We can give them the potential to be faster. We can definitely help them decelerate, which tennis is a huge deceleration sport. Every time I hit a wide ground zone, I have to be able to slow down. I got to be able to get back. Every time I hit a volley, I typically have to be able to decelerate to a certain degree. So that's where the strength comes in. And I think it's important, though, to understand we don't need huge volumes of it. We just need to establish a stressor to the body, let it adapt, and then attack it again. But again, we can do that we can go bilateral, but unilateral, we can get a lot of bang for our buck with a tennis player.
Beautiful. Love it. And so let's say, somebody's listening and they say, oh, wow, Lane Mearbon are talking and I want to go and run outside and get faster. And I also want to strength train as well. So I'm wondering with that gym component, whether you're using weights or not, what is the ideal, set and rep range like, and relatedly, do we want to train our strength? I know you wrote an article recently about, lifting heavy to get fast. And so I was wondering about like the type of workout, and specifically, do we want to train for strength first or power, or, do we want to follow this, 4 weeks of strength and 4 weeks of power, or what's the best way to go about that?
Yeah, that's always a tough question because I've had really good results doing it multiple ways. And my decision is based individually, right? I've had athletes that I know came to me very stable, very coordinated. So I could, not that I skipped steps, I went to the step that was appropriate for them. But typically, if we wanted to just play it safe and get good results, let's build a foundation of strength and an effective movement pattern. Okay, so we could say 4 weeks. We don't know that it's only going to take 4 weeks. We don't know that it might take 3 weeks, whatever. But if I can make sure they understand how to squat and how to start to handle load and how to be able to manage the results of a strength training session, which is going to be soreness and maybe some stiffness for a couple days, right? Once we get through that and we start to build a requisite level of strength, then we can take that strength and we can start to play with tempo. So I could do some isometrics. I could do some eccentrics. I can do things like that. But I'm a real big fan of making sure they have the component of explosive movements all the time, even as a beginner. So I don't have to load them heavy. I can go light. I can go down slow into an eccentric rep, but then explode on the way up, because I just think it's too vital that we synchronize timing of movement. When we make everything slow, even though we're getting a nice response, like a nice tissue response to that slower eccentric or isometric movement, still, I need my players to be able to have timing and speed of that timing. So I make sure we have speed right off, okay? I just control how much I do. Now, sets and reps. I'm real big on, I would rather stay in like the 6 to 10 range, maybe early on, because if I go 6 to 10, I know they're not going to go too heavy because they're just not going to be able to do that much if they have to get to that rep range, right? So that's a pretty good. 6 is going to give me a pretty good strength response. 10 will give me somewhat of a strength response for that particular athlete, but I'm going to start to build a little bit of, muscle hypertrophy and response that way, which can be beneficial. And we're not talking about big boxing or big bodybuilding muscle. We're just talking about building a more resilient tensile strength of the muscle. Then I like to get my athletes into like 4 to 6 sets of anywhere from 3 to 5 reps. So I like to hit that range. So I know I'm not going to put too much damage on the tissue, but I know I'm going to get good speed. I know I'm not going to have too much residual soreness after that. and I can still get some good quality strength, but I'm starting to build some power at that range as well. And I'm not afraid to go heavy, but a lot of times going heavy might be like a single leg, rear elevated split squat with dumbbells. So I've reduced some potential, loading, not being able to squat really well, but single leg, I can do it and really get a great response out of that.
Love it. That's fantastic. And I know you mentioned that it's kind of different for different individuals, but when you mentioned those two different kind of rep ranges and associated weight, is that something that like sometimes you'll just have those in the same week you kind of alternate between those, or do you kind of have it in like, 4 weeks of that and then 4 weeks of the next range?
Yeah, I'm pretty big on wave loading, which for the listeners would mean I may have, let's say we did a Monday, Wednesday, Friday sequence. We may start out at like 8 reps. Then we may go on Wednesday down to that 5, 6 range. And then on Friday, we may bump up to 10. And then the next week we go right back. So we kind of got this wave action going on. So I can get a different response. I can control the amount of weight that's being lifted. I can control the speeds that I want based on how many reps I'm going. And if I'm typically up to that 10 range, I reduce my total number of sets. If I'm down around that 5 or 6, I might bump up the sets a little bit to still get a little more exposure.
Got it. Great stuff, Lee. So when you encounter tennis athletes, what are maybe a couple things that, when you see them training or doing certain things, you think, gosh, like this is a huge mistake, and maybe it's something that you've actually have seen a pattern of. Just curious about if you've observed any of those types of things.
Is there any particular type of training? Are you talking about like weight room training or? Oh
yeah, sorry, I should have specified. I would say either the speed and agility training or the weight training, either one.
Okay, so I'll actually touch on both real quick. Mm-hmm. So the speed and agility, and this is really, really big, especially early days when I was in the academies, is they like to send them on miles. They like to send them out for long runs. Mm-hmm. I was never a big fan of that, not because I'm afraid of long running, but because, number one, they take a tremendous pounding all day. They play a lot of tennis. It's a lot of work. Distance running is a very heavy foot contact where they have to use more muscular energy. Sprinting is very elastic. It's almost free energy in terms of the response off the ground. There's stored energy in that Achilles tendon and the muscle, and it responds really quick. When I jog, most kids jog on their heel and flat foot. So there's a lot of absorbing. There's a lot of weight there that transmits through the back, through the hips, through the knees, and then obviously the ankle and the feet get it. Not to mention, there's not a lot being learned, okay? If you're gonna run with some speed, some technique, and if you want to go intervals to get some conditioning, that's fine, but at least you can train the turnover. So that's one area that I don't like to see tennis players do a lot. If you want to get conditioning, I'd rather put you on a slide board or maybe not an elliptical, but a air-dying bike or something like that where we can get some good work in, but not pound you. Now, in the weight room, some of the big issues I see is just doing so much front side dominant movements, a lot of, even push-ups, bench presses, which are great. There's nothing wrong with it, but that becomes the predominant movement. And we know it just doesn't create the structure that we want at the shoulder joint. It can change our thorax position. It can have an effect on the rest of the body if we do too much of that and we don't back it up with some pulling work and some work on the backside to keep those shoulder blades and the shoulders and the arm in the socket where it should be. So that's a big mistake that I see a lot of players, because if you look at it, especially some of the young guys, with their shirts off, they want to look good, right? And who can blame them, right? They want to look good. The problem is they jack up their shoulders and their neck and everything else. So those are a couple things that I see.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It doesn't sound like that would be so great for a tennis player to have that type of body. So Lee, when I've asked this question to, the fitness experts, it's kind of tough for them. But I was curious to ask you, maybe like some of the better exercises in the gym first, and then maybe later about speed. But I was thinking maybe like, would something like a Bulgarian split squat or lunges, which are like pretty much unilateral. Are there any other ones that are good, really good for us to start out with if we just we don't lift much and we want to actually start to get stronger to help us then get faster?
Yeah, absolutely. Those, first of all, the ones you mentioned are great. There's a squat technique that I use a lot. I learned years and years ago. It's just called the military squat. So imagine putting your left foot flat on the ground and taking your right toe and putting it right at about the level of your left heel. So you're basically a heel-toe relationship, right? So I'm in like a mini lunge, okay? I just got that foot right behind it, but really all the weight is on my left leg. And you squat straight down. So you're basically doing a single leg squat, but you got that right leg, which I like to call as my kickstand, okay? Can you visualize what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Those are phenomenal, and here's why. It puts tremendous load on my quads, my hips. Obviously, I'm going to get hamstring because I'm going to pitch forward a little bit at the upper body, which is going to load the posterior chain. But you have to keep your foot flat, so your knee is going to drive forward a little bit. So I actually get to work the mobility of the ankle joint. I get to work the hip, the knee flexors, the hip extensors, all in the same movement, and it loads that single leg quality really, really well. So now if I take a kettlebell, a dumbbell, I could just take a plate, okay, just like a 40-pound plate or a 20-pound plate, 25-pound plate, and just hold it, right, like a goblet, and squat. That is a really nice load. You can use bands as well. That's one of my favorite exercises to use because it's single leg. I don't need much. I can do it without holding anything. And if I slow my tempo down enough, it is tough. It's a very, very tough exercise. And it used to be done in the military. That's where it came from. So I really like that a lot. Again, for lower body stuff, I am really big on, it's a hybrid single leg RDL with a squat. So you typically when we teach an RDL, it's very hip dominant, very hinge dominant. Well, I include some knee bend, but I get a big forward lean of my upper body. So I can really load hamstring and glute timing, but I also get some good quad. And then we come up out of it and I just like snap myself up out of it. So I squat, bend, come back out of it. Those are really, really good. Again, I can just use a band, a kettlebell or something to hold on to. So I like those a lot as well. And what I like about them is I can tell players, look, you can do this on the tennis court. Before you're going to go play, you can do a couple reps here or a couple sets here. It gets you good and warm. You get a little strength response, and you can do it right out there. So that's one of my advice I'll give to coaches sometimes. I'm like, look, if you don't have a weight room, just bring some bands and things, do some things out on the court, but do some single leg stuff. That's how you can get a strength response from them. And then lastly, I'd mentioned bands. I'm a real big fan of using bands because they're easy, they're low cost. If you have a gym, by all means, use your Kaisers and your cable machines. But if you just have tubing, you can attach it to a pole, to a fence, you can attach it to your door handle, and you can do unilateral rows in a parallel stance, which will challenge the core more. I can go in a split stance, unilateral rows, which now I'm getting a little bit more rotation and torque and spinal and pelvic control. So exercises like that are so easy to do, but yet you can get a big bang for your buck out of them.
Wow. So I'm really excited, Lee. I love working out, and now I have a bunch of things, exercises to add. So I'm really excited. Awesome.
Especially now with COVID, right? When people don't, my advice to people right now is go to Walmart. You can get a band, you can get a kettlebell, you can get a dumbbell for really inexpensive. You can even buy a stick, a roller if you want something to roll out on. you got stuff right there. You can go home and work out in your garage or in your apartment or whatever.
Yeah, it's awesome. I've been adding some things to the gym here. I call it a gym, but it's small. I'm adding some weights, bench. So yeah, that's great. But I mean, as you've shown, you can do it with minimal equipment, even no weights. You can do a lot of these exercises. So love it. So Lee, now kind of going back to the speed training, maybe to give, and I know everybody's different, but maybe to give like the majority of us like a simple template to say, okay, the next time you go out on the court or a track or wherever, just do these, whatever, 3 or 4 exercises. It's like just a simple workout that maybe we could do. Do you have any suggestions for us?
Awesome. Yeah, I certainly do. These will be great to do, simple to do. If you're on the court, they're perfect. Exercise number 1, we're gonna take advantage of not being, and so I work early on. And all I want you to do is stand on the outside sideline of the doubles alley, and you're going to do a standing broad jump, and you're going to jump over the alley, and you're going to land, and you're going to walk back, and you're going to just take a quick rest, and you're going to repeat that 3 times. Then you're going to come back and you're going to do it 3 times with the right leg, but you're landing on 2 feet. We want to be safe, but we want to develop single leg power. Then you're going to do it on the left. So we got our power work done. We warmed up, we got loose, and then we did our broad jump. So we produced a lot of power. Now we're going to sprint. We're going to go back to that doubles. We're going to go right to the baseline doubles alley corner. So we're going, it's basically like 36 feet from doubles to doubles, right? The corner. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to get our sprints in. This is what I call the tennis speed test, right? So we go from corner to corner, and it's about 10.9 meters. And you're going to sprint that, and then you're going to walk back, and you're going to do that again. But you're going full speed, maximal speed, but you're only doing it a maximum of 4 times because you're trying to maximize the speed, okay? And we're not trying to do endurance right now. We just want to get as fast as we can. It's going to be the exposures over the next 3 to 4 weeks, and you're going to see yourself getting faster. The next exercise you're going to do is we're going to stay with the doubles alley. You're going to get outside the doubles alley completely. And you're going to face you're facing the net, but you're outside the net because you're outside the complete doubles alley, right? And you're going to shuffle. You have to shuffle across the alley, okay? Just think of a basketball player shuffling laterally. You're going to shuffle all the way across it until you get both feet inside the singles line all the way. And then you change directions and you go right back out. You're going to go over and back 4 times. Okay, that's the lateral. We call that the lateral volley quickness test. Okay, so you're going to go as quick as you can across that alley. That's now we got our lateral stuff working. Then what we want to do is we want to go to the net. I typically measure this at 9 feet off the net, so you could literally walk it off 9 feet basically. So you're not quite in between the service box and the net, but you're close, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to face the net, and you're going to turn your feet in what we call a hip turn. You're going to turn as fast as you can and sprint straight back to the baseline, right till you get to the tee of the baseline. You're going to do that twice, turning to your right, just like you're chasing a lob, and then you're going to do it twice, turning to your left. So, and that's about 30 feet. So it's not extremely far, but it's about 30 feet. And you're going to do that, you're 2 times on each side. Okay. Now, the last one I would love for you to be able to do, and the listeners to be able to do it. You just need to get 4 cones. Okay. About 9-inch cones. Okay. They're not the real big ones, but about 9 inches. And we call this a cone stack drill. Okay. So you're going to take them and you're going to place them out one. You're going to take your 1 cone and put it outside the doubles alley. Okay, just put it right on the line. And then you're going to walk in. You can walk in maybe about 4 yards, something like that, or 4 meters. and you're going to put the other 3 cones right next to each other. So they look like this, 1, 2, 3, right next to each other. You're going to start at the other cone, the first cone. You're just going to run, pick up 1 cone, bring it back and stack it. Go get the next one, bring it back and stack it. Get the last one and stack it. And see how quick you can do that. You should be somewhere in between 7 to 10 seconds, depending on how fast you are. And you do that on the right side and then get on the left side and do it from that side as well. Those are the things that I give people to do all the time on the court. They're easy. They build power, speed, lateral change of direction, and then you can have some fun with that cone stack drill, which is a great change of direction drill.
Wow, Lee, this is awesome. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure the listeners do too. And, obviously, I'm sure people are going to be rewinding right now and listening to it again to make sure they get everything.
That was a lot of stuff.
Yeah, no, it's great though. Really simple and fantastic. So, when we think about things like the spider drill and like longer type sprints, like, is that something that we shouldn't really be doing until we get, these like shorter, like explosive drills down, or do you sometimes sprinkle them in every now and then?
Yeah, no, I think you can do them anytime. I think it can be used as a barometer for how you're doing. How are you improving on that? How is your endurance to be able to stay quick all the way till you get to the very end of the star drill or the spider drill or whatever one we choose that has a little bit of duration to it, right? I think they're good. I think what we want to do is we want to be able to establish a model of what it looks like when we get to the point. So whether it's getting to a cone or whatever line intersection we're getting to where we change direction, what does that look like? What should it look like? How should my foot position be and how should my shoulders be? Because my biggest problem with some of those drills is tennis players run through them and they're really sloppy on their change of direction. So if I'm moving out for a wide forehand and I hit an open stance forehand, my right foot, in my case, because I'm a righty, would be facing probably about 45 degrees out towards the bleachers, right? The sideline. But after I do that, now my foot has to turn sideways so I can now push off it like I'm doing a shuttle run and come back in. So if we use these star drills or spider drills, I like to make sure the athletes understand what does the model of change of direction look like. And it's very simple to teach. It's just making sure our foot is sideways. It should be perpendicular to the direction we're going. So I have a nice big foot plant to change direction. It'd be no different than me teaching somebody the model of a kick serve or the model of a high backhand slice return, right? There's a model there. Not everybody's the same, but they're within that model framework.
Very nice. Very nice. Appreciate that. Kind of a very technical question, but when we're doing the shuffle, how low should we be to the ground? I mean, I remember, doing this with instructors and some of them are saying to get like super low, like a, 90-degree squat type of thing. And so I was just curious, what the general guidelines are for that.
Yeah, that's a tough one because the reason athletes like to stay tall and in tennis, oh my goodness, when I was at the tennis academies, all you hear was like, bend your knees, bend your knees. The problem is relative strength is important and genetic predisposition to elastic energy is important. So for example, what does that mean? If I've worked with athletes that if I get them bent too low, if they go much more than 45-degree knee bend, which isn't that deep, okay, it's not a tremendous amount of depth, but if I get them much below that, they slow down because they're very elastic by nature, which means they don't want to use a lot of muscular power. They want to use elastic energy, which is quicker. So when a tennis player is moving laterally or they're getting ready for their split step, the shorter they make themselves, the more knee, ankle, and hip bend, well, now they got to come out of that ankle, knee, and hip bend a long ways. That takes more time. That's a powerful muscular action. I don't want that. I want elastic, quick pop. I want them in and out. So the depth that we get them at is very individualized. Now, for me, I'm not very tall. I'm 5'10". I played college basketball. I played tennis. I was very comfortable. Like I have short, not very long legs. So I was comfortable getting pretty low. Plus I had really strong hips. I could move low, but it wasn't because I was completely squatting. My legs were wide. So if my legs are wide, my knee joint still wasn't bent a ton. It was just wide. And so when I struck the ground with a fairly straight leg, and I still used elastic energy. But coaches would say, yeah, you're nice and low. Well, yeah, it was low, but my feet were wide and I had the elastic. It wasn't like I was down doing a front squat position, right, where you're really compact. So coaches make a mistake. Sometimes they slow their players down. I have a player that worked with me. She's a Division I player right now in Indiana. And her coach used to tell her to get low all the time. And I explained to him the science behind it. And surprise to me is he actually said, I never thought of it that way. And it actually made sense to him. And he never asked her to get low anymore like that. And she started to move better.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah. I'm glad that coach had his mind open to learning things. Definitely the key to growing. And but that reminds me of Dr. Mark Kovacs, who, obviously a great expert in this type of field. And he mentioned, on the serve, a lot of players, like sometimes they're just bending way too low and then they don't have that elastic energy to, bounce back up and explode into the ball. So you don't necessarily need to, as Lee has just said, overbend. So that's great there. Lee, another question, numbers based, I guess, is I'm curious of, optimal or, just a general guidelines on how do we partition, the ratios of like tennis practice to then, on court or track, speed and agility training, as we had just talked about with those, exercises. And then also like training in the gym. Like, do you have any sort of rough, ratios for that or guidelines?
Yeah, if I were, everybody's different, every situation is different, but if I were to say a guideline, this is what I would like to see. I'm a huge fan of sprinting, and I know in the tennis arena, it's not as well received always because they're like, well, we don't sprint. I'm like, I don't want them to be great sprinters. I want them to use sprinting to benefit their movement on tennis. So I would like to see tennis players sprint twice a week. But again, we're only talking 3 to possibly 5 reps. Not a lot. I just need a max effort so that we're getting a response from the ground. Okay, so that's number one. That's only taking a really small amount of time. The strength training, again, I am very fine with a strength trainer, a tennis player strength training twice a week. If we get 3, good, but I don't know that we always need it. I think they need exposure to it. I think they can get a lot of benefit from it, but I would be foolish as a strength and conditioning coach to think I'm more important than the play of tennis. They're tennis players. They're not coming to me to become great at strength training or to become great at sprinting. I'm using those tools so they play better tennis. So I want to reduce my overall percentage of time training, and I want them to be able to have time on the court, time on the matches or whatever. But having said that, I'm not a huge fan of like 3-hour practices and 4-hour practices. I think they need to be sharp, really good break. And then maybe if they want to come back later and work on another skill set, that's fine. So in terms of numbers throughout the week, so if we took 7 days, I would like to see 2 days of speed work, 2 days of strength work, and they can be on the same day. I have no problem with that. And then the other days of their tennis work, I just think they have to reduce their volume of overall tennis practice because I think they hit so much that they never have the chance to optimize performance because they're always in recovery mode. They never get out of recovery because they constantly go back. So I don't know if that was an exact answer in terms of percentage, but that kind of gives the listeners like, oh yeah, that's not as much as I thought he would say. They probably thought I was going to, no, and here's the other thing, and you know this, tennis is lateral movement. It's quickness. It's so they're getting it. I can just refine it. When I get them, I can just fine tune those skills and like, hey, go back, move on the court. I'll help fix it, but I don't need to give them a ton of volume. I just want them to get fast.
Love it. This is extremely helpful, obviously, for not only just because you're, guiding us on the, percentages and exercises, but also it kind of calms people in the sense that, when things feel like they're a ton of work or overwhelming, then they tend to not, venture into doing those things. But, you're basically telling us that, hey, you can keep tennis as a priority and, you're not going to be strength training and sprinting, 5 days a week. It's something that you want to even just prioritize tennis and then use these as tools to help you play better. And it can only be, a couple of times a week for each of those. So that's really helpful.
Yeah. And you know what I would say is, let's say, I'll give you two examples. Let's say they were in season. This could be a high school player. The professional's always in season for the most part. But in season, maybe you sprint once a week and you do it once every 7 days. Everyone, once they warm up really good, anybody can give me 3 30-yard sprints. Okay, that's not going to be very taxing, but their central nervous system is going to say, I like that. That's good. That keeps me sharp, keeps me fast. They are not going to they're not going to get slower. They're going to get faster, or at least, if anything, at least maintain. But ideally, we want to get faster. And then the strength training, if we can get that in a couple times a week. Now, if they're off season, let's say we had a player that just had a long season. And they're like, what? I'm taking 8 weeks off. Maybe now I say, hey, you know what? Let's spend some time. Maybe let's get 3 strength training sessions in. We'll still get our 2 sprint sessions in. Maybe we'll do a little more lateral stuff to work on that scene. You're not going to be on the court much at all. And then I might adapt and adjust, because maybe I can fix some areas that they really need, or raise some low functioning areas that because they played all the time, maybe they lost some raw strength that they could use. So those are examples of in season, and then out of season, how you can manipulate it.
Love it. Great stuff. And as far as recovery, which you kind of you mentioned a bit, what guidelines you have for us on recovery, general fundamental principles that maybe we should keep in mind that, will really impact our quickness on the court and just overall performance? Yeah.
So I'm gonna hit a couple different topics here. So the recovery things that we don't always, athletes and coaches don't always talk about, is obviously sleep and good nutrition. So if we can get those 2 down, so the sleep is going to say, okay, you did all this work, you learned a new serve today, you learned some new speed stuff and strength training. While you're sleeping and you're not bothering me, that's when I'm going to go to work. The brain's saying, hey, now it's all me. I'm going to get rid of stuff that I don't need, and I'm going to store things that you showed me were pretty important today. This is why sleep is so vital. And these athletes who stay up till 1 a.m. on a computer or a phone or whatever, and then get up really early, they miss that opportunity. The brain is like saying, I'm sorry, you didn't give me enough time. I have time. I need time to do my work, right? So if we can get that part, that's half the battle. Now, if we get proper nutrition and hydration, those 2 things can say, all right, you really tore me up today, so I need my protein to build back those tissues, and I need my carbohydrates or my fats or whatever to help cellular or whatever it is. So those are really important. Now, from the other standpoint of just mobility, when we do something as aggressive and as pounding as tennis, the joints get compacted. They get sometimes shifted because we put so much stress on certain muscles versus other muscles, and now we've got stress, and now the joints have shifted a little bit. We need to do some good quality mobility to start to reset. We need to be able to breathe. Breathing helps us reset posture. And that's a whole other podcast we could do on breathing, but just they could easily learn how to breathe well, to expand and be able to help themselves recover after workout. So those with sleep, with nutrition, with mobility, and then breathing are big things. Now, the last part I want to take is I'm going to talk about recovery while they're training and while they're playing. Most players don't realize they can lower their heart rate pretty quick, and they can recover fairly quick in between a long rally. If they just had a really hard rally, right to left, back and forth, and running a lot, and now they'll have 20 seconds, they got to get ready to go again. So they need to be able to stop. They need to be able to get breath. They need to be able to get that carbon dioxide out of their body and exhale, but they need to be able to get oxygen flow again. So they need to be able to just stop and relax. Now, this is going to sound funny to a lot of people, and people are going to think I'm crazy. But if you watch a track athlete, especially like your 400, 800 milers and up, when they finish, what's the first thing they do? They put their hands on their knees and they breathe. And there's a reason for that. When that happens, they instantly get a release so that they can actually expand and breathe easier. There's not so much pressure on the diaphragm. It can open up. So even if a tennis player needed to even if they just put their hands on their knees for 10 seconds and breathe or whatever, that can help them recover. Now, I'm not saying they need to do that, but that is a strategy that I use with my athletes a lot. And a lot of coaches say, hey, look see, they're tired. No, we're not tired. We're actually recovering better than you guys walking around with your hands on your head and your ribs are now closed down and you're not breathing as well, right? So we teach them strategies like that help them be able to recover in between points. So I know that was a lot of stuff, but those are kind of areas that we try to focus on.
No, it's amazing. Really cool. I obviously did not know about, the last point you made about putting your hands on your knees that actually helps you. So very cool. Very cool. I won't feel ashamed to do that next time.
No. Well, isn't it funny how when you watch someone that's really tight, that's what they do naturally, but yet we ignore it.
Yeah.
But yet the body is telling you, look get my diaphragm a relaxed position. And when you drop forward, it relaxes a little bit easier. So, yeah.
Wow. Super neat. So Lee, I know a lot of what we talked about today stressed simplicity and the fact that you don't necessarily need, crazy equipment to do these, to train effectively and efficiently. But I was wondering if there are any particular tools that you might use with your athletes. I've recently been looking into things like the Whoop strap and the Aura rings, interesting pieces of equipment. But I was curious if there's anything that you suggest or use with your athletes.
I'm very simple and easy because I can make adjustments, and if athletes need them when they're away from me, they can use them. So I like bands, like the looped bands that are like a big rubber band. I have a special kind that is a typical band that you would see is 40 inches. Okay, the big rubber bands. I have some that are 80 and 110. So I can do a lot more with the athletes. I can resist them further, and I don't have to tie two of them together. I can do things like that. I love the bands. I'm a big medicine ball fan for various reasons. And then with strength training, like you were talked about rings and stuff, I like straps or like TRX. I don't use TRX directly. I use a different kind just because they're a little bit smaller, more versatile. I can stuff them in my bag and travel, called jungle gym straps. And I love things like that for tennis players because I can train their whole body very easily. I can hook it up on a fence and do it right out there if I need to. I can do it as a warm-up, or after they just finished a session, if I needed to, I could do strength training right there on the tennis court before they're done and want to go home or go hit the shower or whatever. So those are basic things. The other thing I will say, I like using low boxes or a low step. So I'm big at about 2 inches to 3 inches, sometimes up to 4, but I like the low ones because I can do quick reactive jumps. I can do lateral movement over them, which we have a whole sequence for. And they're low expense. They're easy to do. Anybody can get them. Anybody can do them. You can build them. A lot of people just buy like a 2x10. They cut it at about 20 inches long, and then you put a little rubber mat on it, and there you go. You got one. It's real cheap. And I do a ton of stuff with my tennis players using, it's called low box training is what it is. And we do a lot of stuff with those tools.
Wow, super neat. And Lee, I obviously have, researched what you're doing, but with the bands, is that like your own product, or is that just like something else that you bought?
Yeah, it's something I bought. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Cool.
Yep.
Very nicely. We could talk for hours, and I specifically really love talking about fitness in relation to tennis. And I just want to kind of educate the audience about what you're doing. You have obviously a great website at leetaft.com, if I have that correctly.
Yep.
So what type of coaching and consulting do you offer? And do with athletes?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So prior to COVID hitting, I was traveling a lot. I would travel about 40 times a year. I was out of the country. I was in different states working with different organizations of different sports as well. And then once COVID hit, we pivoted and we do a lot of things online now. So I consult a lot online. I have, just like everybody else, virtual training. We do things of that nature. And I also do a lot of consulting with coaches. So like we help coaches learn how to do training online and stuff like that. And we're working a lot in the tennis industry on that. And then we just recently released the Certified Tennis Speed Specialist course. That's ctss.co.co. That's something that we did, and it's a big course. It's 17 modules and breaks down all the movements. That's something that coaches can use, athletes can use, directors of academies, things like that. So we're real proud of that. And that was the one thing that I noticed is from my years of being in tennis, no one really attacked the speed, like the models. How should we be teaching movements, and how should we build systems around it and things like that? So I wanted to do that for the tennis industry. So we created that this summer, actually, and that's been going really well. So those are places, and like you said, leetaft.com are places that they can learn more about what we're doing.
Fantastic. Yeah, and we'll definitely link up to the certified, was it the Certified Speed Specialist? Is that the right?
Yeah, Certified Tennis Speed Specialist. Yeah,
beautiful.
CTSS.
Got it. Awesome. And for anyone listening, I know you're obviously extremely busy, and it's awesome to hear. Do you do any? Do you take like clients as well, or are you currently like really booked with everything else?
Yeah, I have a couple that I work with right now. And funny thing, here's the funny part. I've got 2 baseball players that I have right now, and they're both from IMG.
Nice.
What happened was, they knew I was down here when we moved, and they had followed me over the years, and they knew we were here. And so they asked if I would do stuff. So they don't come very often because they're obviously very busy there. But like one of the players needed help with getting better for his 60 for the combine. So we just were helping him with that. And then another one actually was dealing with some back pain. So we're trying to help him through some back pain stuff and get him moving again.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, Lee, it's been a great discussion, and I was wondering if you were to recommend 3 books that you could give to, or that you would give to a friend to help them improve their speed. I was wondering, you obviously seem like a very learned individual, even though I know a lot of it has come through, sheer experience and learning from others. But are there any books out there that you would recommend to help our speed?
Yeah, there's, so you've got basic books like, USA Track and Field. And the reason I mentioned that is because the foundation and the fundamentals of technique and running are good. So something simple like that is very good. There's gosh, I'm trying to think of the name. I can see the book. I've read them, and now I'm caught without think of the name of the book. But there's German textbook of speed is another one that is really, really good that someone can get a lot of information out of. A German textbook for sprinting is actually what it's called, is a really good book. And then you've got guys out there that have done stuff like, or people like Exos, which is a company that does a lot of good sprint work. Altus is another one that does a lot of good stuff. They're not necessarily books, but they're resources that people can look at and get some good information. Probably the minute we stop this recording, everything will pop back in my head here, but that's usually the way it happens.
Yeah, same here.
But yeah, that's usually what happens. So there's a lot of good books that I've read. I've had so many of them, and I just can't recall the names of them at the top of my head here.
Yeah, no worries. If you could erect a huge billboard in like the most highly trafficked city, where you are right now or nearby, and you could put anything that you want on it, that a ton of people would see as they drive by or walk by, what would you write on it?
Man, you know what? That might be one of the best questions I was ever asked. That's a very creative question. I'll tell you, the older I've gotten, the more my focus has been on becoming a mentor. And I don't just mean people like, you and I and coaches older than myself that have been around. I don't just mean people that have a lot of experience. I also mean kids mentoring other kids. And this is one of my foundational things that we teach a lot, is I'm real big, and there is nothing that makes us feel better. Like, we all like to receive something. We like to receive input. We like to receive coaching. But the power of coaching somebody else or helping somebody else or teaching somebody else is incredibly powerful, because you impacted a human. And what that does for me, so if you coached me on something and I did really well and you were able to help me solve something, you're going to probably walk away feeling unbelievably good about yourself. And we need that. We need that right now. We need people in this country that right now we're having a tough time, right? As a nation, a lot of divisiveness, but the kids are getting it too. So on my billboard, I would say, teach someone, help somebody else, teach them, because I think it would raise morale of those who were teaching, and that's going to make you feel better. And then the other people, then you just pass it on. So that's something that I spend a lot of time on. Beautiful.
I love it. That's excellent. Where can people connect with you? I know we mentioned LeeTaft.com, but on any social accounts that you want to shout out?
Yeah, any of my social media accounts are pretty much at Lee Taft, so real simple, just at my name. But those are the best ones to get me. My email, where most people will reach out, is just simply my initials, LT, at LeeTaft.com. That's so if people want to go directly to me, I always share my email, and I'm very good, even though sometimes it might take me a little bit, but I'm very good. I get back to everybody. I'm a people person, so I never ignore anyone.
It's very commendable. I'm sure you get a lot, and it can be tough sometimes. But that's great. Thanks, Lee. And one last question for you today, a classic question that I ask everybody, and you've given us a lot of great advice today. But what is one key tip that you can give our audience to help them improve their speed on the court?
Yeah, I would say probably one of the key things that they could do is to do drills that force them to be reactive. If we do what we call closed drills, where like I put a cone here and a cone here and we run to that cone, that's good. There's benefit to that. But if I can react, like if you were my coach and you tossed a tennis ball and I had to go run and catch that tennis ball before it bounced twice or something like that, that reactive speed not only helps my footwork and mechanics and all that, I can improve that. But the biggest thing it does, if we go all the way back to the beginning of this interview, we talked about reading, reacting, perceiving something, and then making a very quick decision. That's critical. That right there is one of the biggest things that I do to help athletes get faster on a court, is I make them have to read, see something, and make a decision on how fast, what angle of pursuit they have to make to get there. I think that will help them as much as anything. Got
it, Lee. Well, I want to thank you a lot again for your time and, just overall, the passion that you bring to this industry and, helping people get faster and stronger and, enjoy their sport more, and live healthier lives. So really appreciate it. And really enjoyed chatting with you, and hopefully we can do it again soon. And yeah, just really appreciate you being on the Tennis Files podcast. So thanks a lot, Lee. And everybody check out LeeTaft.com and at Lee Taft on his social media profiles.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah.
All right. I really hope you enjoyed my interview with Lee Taft. Lee, really appreciate you coming on, as I mentioned, and really enjoyed talking with you. And I'm personally really excited again to put a lot of the exercises and principles and drills into practice as soon as I can, especially that military squat. Pretty awesome. And if you enjoyed this episode and if you have been learning from the Tennis Files podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you would leave a review for the show. And you can do that by going to tennisfiles.com/Apple Podcasts and leaving a review, or just do it on your favorite podcast app of your choice. However, the Apple Podcast reviews will help the show the most. But I really appreciate any feedback that you can give me so that I can improve the show and also know what I'm doing well, not well, etc. So that would be great. And I would like to leave you with a quote, as I often like to do at the end of the show. And this one is by Anton Chekhov. And Anton said, "Wisdom comes not from age, but from education and learning." And if you are learning through this podcast, and I applaud you, if you're listening to the podcast, big ups to you, because you're learning and you're gaining that education that you then need to put into practice, which is really the most important. You don't just learn and then sit on the couch and eat those Cheetos. I haven't had Cheetos for such a long time, which is great. But yes, you really want to, again, go back and, I would love for you to do that speed workout that Lee described in great detail. Pretty simple. Certainly doesn't seem super taxing. I think anybody can do it, provided that you're healthy and in good shape. And, I'd love for you to do that and then to email me and or Lee and let us know how it went for you. So, all right, that's about it from me. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I certainly enjoyed it myself. And I will see you on the next episode of the Tennis Files podcast. Oh, and check out the show notes as well before I leave. You can do that at tennisfiles.com/176, or just go to the app, to your podcast app, to check out the links, including leetaft.com. All right. Have a great one, and we'll see you next time. Take care.